Music. Welcome back, guys, to Detective's Diary. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about cabins in Appalachia from people who went into the mountains looking for peace and found something else entirely. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now, let's start. My dad said we needed a real weekend, something to clear our heads. His big idea. The old family cabin buried deep in the Appalachian hills, just us and nature. My mom didn't come. She said the cabin gave her a bad feeling. She even laughed when she said, "You'll see." But her eyes didn't match the laugh. By the time we rolled up to the cabin, I had that weird feeling where you're glad the drive is over, but something in you wishes it wasn't Beto. The place looked like it had given up on being a home a long time ago. Sagging roof, peeling paint, windows clouded like old glass bottles. Dad called it rustic charm. I called it structurally questionable. The trees crowded right up to the porch like they wanted in. No other cabins, no power lines, just the dirt road curling back into the hills like the world ended here. Inside smelled like dry timber and dust, the kind of smell that clings to your throat. My uncle cracked a joke about it being aged like fine whiskey, and Dad laughed like that explained everything. We unloaded the gear, sleeping bags, canned food, a lantern since the gas line was long gone. The floor creaked under every step like the cabin was testing our weight. Lunch was beans and crackers straight from the can. Dad and my uncle made a big show of roughing it, but I could tell they missed Wi-Fi as much as I did. Still, for a few minutes. It almost felt like what Dad promised. Quiet, simple. Then he said we needed propane. The lantern's little tank wouldn't last the night. So, we climbed back into the car. The three of us packed in like we hadn't just escaped it, and started back down the dirt road that clawed its way out of the hills. That's when I saw the truck. It appeared like it grew out of the trees, old Ford rust chewing the fenders, one headlight fogged white. No plate on the front at first. I figured he was just another local heading into town, but then he closed the gap so fast it made my stomach jump. Rode our bumper until I could see the paint flaking off his hood. Then he dropped back, then lunged forward again. I leaned forward between the seats. "Dad, I see him," calm voice. But his knuckles whitened around the wheel. The truck didn't pass, just stuck to us, jerking forward and back like the driver couldn't decide what he wanted. The road was too narrow for anything stupid. One wrong move and we'd be wrapped around a tree. "Maybe he wants by," my uncle muttered. "Then he can wait," Dad said, eyes on the road, when the truck surged close. I got a look at the driver, pale face under a sweat-stained cap, jaw working like he was grinding his teeth. His mouth moved like he was yelling, but I couldn't hear over the engine. His fist slammed the steering wheel in sharp bursts, like he was psyching himself up. I spotted the stop sign ahead and felt relief like cool air. Maybe he'd blow past us. We slowed. Gravel popped under the tires. The truck braked so hard behind us, I thought we'd feel the hit. Then his door flew open. A man climbed out, late 20s, maybe 30, stringy frame, jeans clinging like he'd slept in them. He moved fast, boots biting into the gravel, shoulders squared like a fight was coming. Dad didn't wait. He threw the car in park and was out before I could blink. "Get back in your truck," he said, calm, flat, a voice that didn't need repeating. The guy froze mid-step, jaw twitching, eyes jumping from Dad to the car like he was making calculations. Then his lips peeled back in this grin that didn't reach his eyes. His teeth were small, too small, like they belonged to someone else. Another car crested the hill behind him, tires whispering over gravel. The guy's head snapped toward it, without a word. He bolted back to his truck, slammed the door, and tore past us, spitting rocks like gunfire, for a few seconds. None of us moved. Dad slid back in like nothing happened, started the car, and drove. "You think he was drunk?" my uncle asked. "Probably," Dad said. but his jaw stayed locked, and he kept flicking his eyes to the mirror like he didn't believe himself. By the time we hit town, my shoulders had unclenched. We grabbed propane and some gas station snacks and headed back. The sun was dropping, staining the trees in crooked orange beams, and then we saw him. Same truck parked in the left turn lane at the crossroads, engine idling like it had been waiting. Dad let out this laugh too sharp, like breaking glass. "Big rush to go nowhere," he said, then grinned at my uncle. "Watch this." Before I could ask, he rolled down his window, leaned out, and yelled, "Hey, jackass!" The guy's head whipped toward us. Dad started pounding the steering wheel, screaming nonsense like a lunatic, copying the tantrum we'd seen earlier. Something broke in that man's face. The truck jerked backward, tires screaming, then swung out so hard it fishtailed. It came for us like a battering ram. "Hang on," Dad said, and wrenched the wheel. We shot across the intersecting road, bouncing so hard my teeth clacked. The truck missed us by inches, spun wide, then came tearing after us. Dad floored it. The sedan shuddered like it was ripping apart, engine howling as we clawed up the winding road. The truck stayed close, headlights flaring in the mirror like molten eyes. Every curve felt like the one where we'd go flying. Then the highway ramp appeared. Dad yanked the wheel at the last second, gravel spraying like shrapnel. We shot up the incline. Behind us, a horn wailed long and low, echoing through the hills like something dying, and then silence. Nothing in the mirror but empty road and trees. Dad didn't ease off until the cabin came into view. By then, the hills were black teeth against a starless sky. Inside, the quiet pressed on us. My uncle checked the locks twice without being told. Dad stood by the window a long time, staring down the dirt road like he expected headlights to bloom out of the dark. Later, the landline rang, the one Mom insisted we keep. My uncle answered, told her everything. Her voice came sharp and clear through the old receiver. "You get my baby out of there now." Dad didn't argue, but he didn't pack either. We stayed the night, and I wish we hadn't. I didn't sleep. Every groan of the old floorboard sounded like footsteps. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard tires crunching far down the road, slow crawling. I froze, barely breathing until the sound faded. Morning brought no comfort. When we stepped outside, there were fresh tire tracks in the gravel. They stopped just before the trees, then turned back. That was the last time we ever went to the cabin. Years later. Dad still brings it up sometimes, but never with a smile, because deep down we all know the truth. That man wasn't drunk. He wasn't just angry. He wanted something. The cabin wasn't mine. It belonged to Jenna's uncle, some old hunting place tucked deep in the Appalachian mountains. Jenna pitched it like a dream. No phones, no people, just a wood stove and a weekend of quiet. After the semester I'd had, it sounded perfect. The drive was long, the kind that makes you feel like the map lied. The farther we went, the more the world thinned out. Gas stations vanished first, then the occasional diner, and then even houses. The last hour was nothing but trees and hills rolling on forever. When the pavement finally gave way to dirt, I swear it felt like crossing into another world. There were 4 of us, me, Jenna, her boyfriend Mark, and Kyle. A friend of Mark's I'd met maybe twice. Kyle turned out to be one of those people who can't handle silence. So he filled it with random facts, most of the ride. He rattled off Appalachian folklore stuff like, "If you hear someone calling your name in the woods, don't answer. It's not them." I laughed. He didn't. That's when I realized he wasn't joking. By the time we pulled up, the light was fading fast. The cabin looked like something from an old photo. Sagging porch, leaning stone chimney, dark wood that seemed to swallow the last of the daylight. No electricity, no running water, definitely no cell signal. Jenna grinned like she'd just brought us to paradise. "We came to unplug," she said. "Night 1 was easy, cozy, even. We got a fire going, cracked a few beers, played cards by flashlight. The air inside smelled like old wood and ashes sharp, but not bad. Mark started telling ghost stories, the kind you make up as you go. Jenna hit him with a pillow when he tried to make them scary. We laughed until the fire burned low, then unrolled our sleeping bags on the floor. I fell asleep to the hiss and pop of the last embers. I woke up once, not to a sound, just that weird awareness that you're not home. I lay there staring at the heavy beams overhead, wondering how long they'd been holding up that roof, long enough to feel permanent. Day 2 started fine, cold, but fine. Jenna wanted to hike. Her uncle had told her about a trail that led to a ridge. No signs, no maps, just head toward the ridge and follow the creek. Sounded simple enough. We packed snacks and set out. At first, it was great. The air felt cleaner than anything I'd ever breathed. The ground was springy underfoot, soft with moss and old leaves. We joked, took pictures, argued about who would get eaten first in a horror movie, but after about an hour, I noticed something. Everything looked the same. Trees, rocks, slopes that all blurred together. I mentioned it, and Jenna brushed it off. My uncle hikes here all the time. Another hour later, even she looked less confident. The light had started to shift, not dark yet, but that dull grayish tone that hints it's coming soon. And that's when Kyle stopped dead. Did you guys see this before we all crowded around? It was a footprint, barefoot, deep in the soil, toes spread wide like the person had gripped the ground. The dirt inside was still soft. None of us were barefoot. We were all in boots. Maybe some local likes to walk around like that, Jenna said, forcing a laugh. It didn't sound like her usual laugh. We kept moving faster now. No one wanted to admit we were lost, but we all knew it. My chest felt tight the whole way back. When the cabin finally appeared through the trees, the relief hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud. But then I saw the door. We'd locked it that morning. I remembered the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. Now it was open, just a crack. Mark went in first, muttering something about the wind, but wind doesn't turn dead bolts. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. Our bags were where we left them, the firewood still stacked by the hearth, except Jenna's coat. She'd hung it by the door yesterday. Now it was draped over a chair in the kitchen. Nobody said a word about it. We just lit the fire and stayed close like the heat could explain everything away. That night, the quiet felt different, heavy. Every creak of the cabin made my stomach tighten. By midnight, Mark and Kyle were out cold, snoring like nothing was wrong. Jenna curled up near the fire. I lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the shadows crawling across the ceiling. Sometime later, I woke up thirsty. The fire was mostly embers, glowing faint red. I padded into the kitchen for water, and that's when I saw it. The back door. We hadn't touched it all day. Earlier, I'd watched Mark fight with the lock. It was stiff, needed 2 hands to force it shut. Now it hung loose. The latch turned. I just stood there for a second, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then I relocked it. Didn't wake anyone. Didn't want to. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid they'd confirm what I already knew. I crawled back under the blanket. Pulling it tight like that would make a difference. I don't know how long I slept before the sound woke me whispering. At first, I thought it was Jenna mumbling in her sleep. But then I realized it wasn't inside. It was outside on the porch. Not words, just sounds trying to be words. Slow, dragged out, like someone learning how to speak and getting it wrong. I held my breath and listened. The whisper stopped. Then came the knock. 3 knocks, soft, almost polite. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My whole body locked up. The knocks didn't come again. Instead, I heard footsteps slow, crossing the porch. Then, the crunch of frost as they circled the cabin, and then nothing, just silence. I lay there staring at the door, waiting for the knob to turn. It never did. When daylight finally came, I opened the door before anyone else woke up. The frost outside was covered in prints. bare feet circling the cabin over and over. Some were small, some long, all pressed deep like whoever made them had stood there waiting. We left an hour later, and I haven't gone back to Appalachia since. My uncle owned this old cabin way out in the Appalachian Mountains. He hadn't been up there in decades. He always called it a fixer-upper with character, which, if you translate it from uncle speak, meant it's one stiff breeze away from becoming firewood. The offer came out of nowhere. I was sitting in my apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes I hadn't unpacked because, well, I just quit my job and my relationship exploded in spectacular fashion. Life was loud, too loud. And then he called. If you want to get away for a while, you can stay up there rent-free. Just don't burn it down. That was it. No strings, no conditions. Honestly, I think he half hoped the place would burn down so he could stop paying property taxes on it. But for me, that call was like a rope thrown to a drowning person. I needed out. So, a week later, I was driving into the mountains with half my stuff crammed into the back seat. The drive was long, 2 hours of straight highway. Then another hour on these narrow, winding roads that felt like they just curled tighter and tighter around the hills. I lost cell service about 20 minutes after leaving the interstate. My podcast gave up. Even the radio abandoned me. Nothing but static for the last stretch. It was just me, an empty road, and the hum of my own engine. When I finally pulled into the clearing, I actually laughed. This cabin didn't just look old. It looked like someone had stopped building it halfway through and then forgot about it for 50 years. One room, a porch with loose boards that groaned when you stepped on them, and a deck that leaned like it had given up the will to live. But it was quiet. That was the point. The first couple of weeks were honestly amazing. I slept like a rock, chopped wood, cooked on the old gas stove, read books until the oil lamp flickered low. No deadlines, no calls, no people. My nearest neighbor was supposedly 30 minutes away, and that isolation felt like medicine, and for a while. I believed that the first odd thing wasn't even dramatic, just this weird sense that someone was nearby. You know that feeling when you think someone's watching you. It's not anything you see. It's the way the hair on your arm suddenly stands up like your body knows something before your brain does. I'd be out back splitting logs, and then bam, there it was, like eyes on me, every time I turned. Nothing, just trees. I blamed it on nerves. My city brain wasn't used to silence. Then one afternoon, I was down at the creek filling a jug. The sun was dropping fast, and the air had that heavy, late-day stillness to it. I turned around and froze. There was a man across the creek, not moving, just standing there like he'd been waiting. He was about my age, maybe younger. Jeans so dirty they were practically brown, a torn flannel shirt, and this beard that looked like he'd trimmed it with a rock. "You staying up in the old Carson place?" he called. His voice carried in this flat, matter-of-fact way like he already knew the answer. I hesitated before I said, "Yeah." He nodded like that made sense. Then he smiled. And listen, this wasn't the friendly kind of smile people give when they meet a stranger in the woods. It was the kind that sits in your stomach wrong. "Name's Wade," he said. "I live close by." I didn't ask where. He didn't offer. We said a few more words, nothing memorable. And then he just slipped back into the trees. No sound, no crunch of leaves. Just gone. I told myself it was fine. Just a local checking in. People out here probably did that, right? But after that, I saw him everywhere. At first, it was random. A glimpse on the trail while I hiked down by the creek when I went for water. Always in the distance, always still. Then it changed. I'd step out onto the porch in the morning, and there he'd be leaning against a tree at the edge of the clearing, not close enough to talk, close enough so I knew he wanted me to see him. He never waved, never called out, just stared. I tried to shrug it off. People live differently out here, I told myself. Maybe he's curious. Then the notes started. The first one was on the porch, weighed down with a rock. "Nice to see you by the creek." No name, no signature, just neat block letters in black ink. I laughed when I read it. But my hands were shaking. 2 days later. "You look tired today. Then you should come visit." That one made my stomach knot. Visit where I started locking the door even during the day. The next morning. I noticed something. My axe, the one I kept in the chopping block, was gone. I looked everywhere. It wasn't like I misplaced it. Someone had taken it that night. I stayed up late reading by lamplight, trying to calm down. That's when I heard at the porch boards creaking, slow, heavy. I blew out the lamp and froze. Another creak, closer to the door. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I grabbed the rifle from the corner and sat in the dark, listening. One more creak and then silence. When I finally pulled back the curtain, the porch was empty, but muddy footprints led straight to the door and back into the trees. I barely slept. The next day, I drove into town for supplies and asked the guy at the general store if he knew Wade. Blank look, I described him. The man frowned and said, "Only other cabin up that way burned down 20 years ago. Ain't been nobody living there since." I laughed like it was a joke, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I barricaded the door with a chair and kept the rifle across my lap. Around 3:00 a.m., a dog started barking outside. Except I didn't have a dog. The barking was furious, right outside the window. Then it cut off mid-snarl. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Then the doorknob turned slowly like someone testing it. I yelled that I had a gun and would shoot. The knob froze for a second, then turned the other way. When the door didn't open, I heard him move around back. The boards there creaked once, twice, then nothing. I sat frozen, gripping the rifle so tight my hands ached. 10 minutes passed, maybe 20. Then something slammed against the wall hard, once, twice, a third time, like he was trying to break through. That was it. I wasn't dying in that cabin. I climbed out the bedroom window barefoot, keys clutched in one hand, rifle in the other. I ran to the truck without looking back. When the engine roared, I floored it down the mountain road, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. When I finally glanced in the rear-view mirror, I saw him standing in the clearing right in the glow of my taillights, holding my missing axe in one hand, just watching me go. I didn't stop until I hit the sheriff's office. They sent deputies up the mountain. They didn't find anyone. But when we went back the next morning so I could grab my stuff, the cabin wasn't empty. On the table, perfectly centered, was a single sheet of notebook paper. In those same block letters it said, "You should have stayed longer." Caleb was the one who talked me into it. We hadn't hung out in a while, and he pitched the trip like it was going to fix everything. Stress, burnout, all of it. Just two old friends. A couple days in his family's cabin. Honestly, it sounded amazing at the time. He said it was deep in the Appalachian foothills on land his grandparents had owned for decades. And of course, in my head, I pictured this perfect postcard, a cozy little log cabin with a stone fireplace, maybe a deer wandering by in the morning, that crisp, clean mountaineer everyone raves about. I figured I'd come back feeling like a new person. The drive was brutal, nearly 5 hours. The first half was fine, highway, gas stations, the usual. But after that, it felt like we just drove straight out of the world. The road started twisting like someone had dropped a piece of spaghetti on a map and said, "Yep, that's the route." Each turn was sharper than the last, and the further we went, the fewer signs we saw. Then, one by one, the houses disappeared. No gas stations, no barns, not even mailboxes, just trees. Thick walls of trees closing in on both sides. By the last hour, we had no service, not even one sad little bar clinging to life in the corner of the screen. I kept checking out of habit, but it was dead. No signal, no GPS, nothing. It was just us, the car, And those endless curves. And those mountains. They didn't feel friendly. They weren't like the mountains you see on postcards, with cheerful little cabins and ski lodges. These were massive, dark, like something ancient that didn't care if you got lost in them forever. By the time we finally reached the cabin, the sun had dipped behind the peaks. That last bit of light was hanging on like it didn't want to be there. And the cabin. It was nothing like what I pictured. The porch leaned to one side like the whole thing was tired of standing. The steps sagged in the middle. Moss had climbed halfway up the logs. And the windows were so clouded they didn't reflect anything, just dull gray glass staring back. It didn't look dangerous or haunted or anything like that. It just looked forgotten. Inside. It smelled old, not like mold or anything rotten, just like it had been sealed for years. The air was heavy. The walls were dark timber, the kind that drinks up light instead of bouncing it back. The furniture looked like it had been bought during a different century. Big, clunky chairs, a couch with flattened cushions, shelves full of glass jars containing stuff I couldn't even identify. The fireplace was blackened from years of use, like it had eaten more wood than the trees outside could count. There was no television, no clock ticking in the background, no noise except for us moving around. The hallway was narrow with 2 small bedrooms and a bathroom that looked like it had retired sometime in the 72nd. We unpacked the few things we brought, made a simple dinner in this heavy cast-iron skillet, and played cards on the kitchen table. It actually felt okay for a while, except for one thing: the silence outside. It wasn't like a quiet neighborhood kind of silence where you still hear a dog bark 2 streets over or a car in the distance. This was complete. No crickets, no wind rustling the leaves, just nothing, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I kept telling myself it was because of the cold, but something about it crawled under my skin. Around midnight, I crashed in the spare room. Caleb took the other. The mattress felt like a thick pad thrown over a board, and the blanket smelled faintly like cedar. Not great, not awful. I was out in minutes until something woke me up. I couldn't tell what time it was. There was no clock in the room. But the cabin was pitch black except for a faint glow leaking through the window. I didn't hear anything, nothing at all, but something felt off, like the way the air changes when someone steps into a room behind you. I turned my head toward the window. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare footprints right outside, pressed deep into the soft dirt, still damp from yesterday's rain. Dozens of them clustered near the porch, then trailing off toward the tree ine. They weren't there when we arrived. I shook Caleb awake, dragged him to the window. He stared out for a long time before finally saying, "They're probably old. My cousins come out here sometimes, but the rain was yesterday. Those prints were sharp, crisp, fresh." We locked the doors after that, pretending it was fine, both of us laughing way too hard because that's what you do when you're lying to yourself. Morning didn't make me feel any better. The prints were still there, clear in daylight. And then I noticed something else. There were no small prints, no variation in size. Every single one was identical. Same length, same width. Like one person had walked in circles over and over, leaving the exact same impression each time. I told Caleb. He just shook his head and changed the subject. Neither of us mentioned the hike we'd planned. We stayed inside, made lunch, and played cards again. By late afternoon, the prints were gone. Not washed away, gone. The ground looked too smooth, like someone dragged something flat over it, erasing everything. Caleb swore he hadn't touched them. I believed him that night. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints multiplying in the mud. Around one I heard at the front door creaking, slow, heavy, like weight pressing down on the wood. I told myself it was wind, except we hadn't heard a single gust since we got there. The trees outside didn't even move. I sat up, held my breath. The sound stopped. After what felt like forever, I slipped out of bed and woke Caleb. We armed ourselves with a fire poker and a wrench from the tool bag. Both doors were locked. Nothing looked touched. We ended up sitting in the main room with every light on, just waiting. Then sometime after 3, it started again. Footsteps on the porch, slow, dragging. The boards groaned under the weight. Caleb whispered my name, and I saw it in his face. He heard it, too. We didn't move, didn't even breathe. The steps circled the cabin once, twice, then stopped right in front of the door. We waited. One knock, heavy, then another, harder. Then the sound that still burned into my brain. The scrape of fingernails or something sharper dragging down the wood. Long, uneven lines, slow and deliberate, like it wanted us to hear every second. Caleb grabbed his keys and whispered, "We're leaving." No argument. We bolted through the back door, straight into the trees. No flashlight, no plan, just run. The dark felt solid, like it was swallowing us whole. But we didn't stop. Roots caught our feet, branches tore at our arms, but we just kept going. I didn't look back. But I heard it, the door opening, not breaking, opening. We didn't stop until we hit gravel, eventually. The faint shape of a road appeared, and then headlights. A truck slowed, saw us, and took us into town. Later, Caleb said his family went back. He never told me what they found, just that they boarded the place up and never invited anyone there again. I was 17 when I stayed at my uncle's cabin for the first time. He'd owned that place for years, a small wooden cabin deep in the Appalachian hills. I'd heard about it forever, but never actually been there until that trip. The thing about it is, it's so far out that once you get there, you're basically off the grid. There's no pretending otherwise. No neighbors, no stores, no casual hikers wandering by. Just a single dirt road that winds like a snake through the trees for what feels like forever, and then just ends in front of the porch steps. That's it. You drive in, and the world behind you might as well disappear. He always said it was safe out there, peaceful. That was the word he liked to use. Everyone who knew the mountains said the same thing. If you keep to yourself, nothing will bother you. That sounded perfect to me at the time. I wanted quiet. I wanted space. I wanted to be unreachable for a while. No buzzing phone, no friends popping in, no teachers reminding me about college applications, just silence. So when he offered to let me stay there for a week, I said yes without even thinking. A whole week out in the woods with nothing to do but read and sleep and maybe wander around a little. It sounded like exactly what I needed. The first couple days were everything I'd hoped for. Simple, easy. I read a whole book the first day, made some basic meals on the old stove, took short walks down the trails that split off behind the cabin, at first. The no cell service thing made me twitchy. I kept pulling my phone out like some addict, watching the no signal symbol like it might magically change if I stared at it hard enough by the second day. Though, I kind of liked it. It was freeing in a way I didn't expect. Everything was fine until the third night after dinner. I stepped outside to grab more firewood. That's when things started to feel off. And I'm not talking about anything dramatic. Nothing jumped out at me, no loud noise, no shadow moving across the trees, just something wrong that I couldn't explain. The wood pile wasn't far, maybe 20 steps from the porch. But when I walked out there, it felt longer. The path to the trees, the clearing around the stack. It all seemed slightly different, like someone had gone and rearranged the world while I wasn't looking. The clearing felt smaller, the trees seemed closer, and when I turned around, the cabin looked farther away, just enough to make me stop and stare at it for a second. My stomach tightened a little. It was such a stupid thing to notice. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Everything felt shifted by a few inches, like an off-center picture frame you can't stop looking at. I laughed at myself because what else do you do? Told myself it was the angle or the dark or whatever, grabbed the wood and went back inside. Locked the door because why not? Later that night, I was half asleep when I heard it. A knock, just one. I froze. There's no way anyone should have been out there. My uncle was hours away. Nobody else even knew I was staying in that cabin. I waited. Nothing else happened. No second knock. No footsteps on the porch. No sound of anyone walking away. I told myself it was the wind catching a loose board. Sure, that sounded good enough at the time, but I didn't sleep much after that. Every creak of the old wood made me sit up and listen. The next morning, I tried to shake it off, made coffee, cooked some eggs, tried to make it feel like a normal day. Around mid-morning, I decided to walk down to the stream and fill a bucket. It was about a 15-minute round trip, give or take, when I got back. The cabin door was wide open. I dropped the bucket so fast, water splashed everywhere. My first thought was animal, a raccoon or a stray dog or something. But when I stepped in it, I knew immediately it wasn't that. Every chair in the cabin, the two by the table, the one by the window, the rocker by the fireplace, they'd all been moved into the center of the room, arranged in a perfect circle. I can't even describe how wrong that looked. Chairs aren't supposed to be in the middle of a room facing inward like that. It looked deliberate. I stood there for a long time, not moving, just staring, waiting for something else to happen, waiting for someone to step out from behind the door. No one did, eventually. I shoved the chairs back against the walls, locked the door, and sat down. My hands were shaking so badly. I could hear my own knuckles crack when I gripped the edge of the table. The rest of the day, dead quiet. Too quiet. The woods outside sounded like they'd been emptied. No birds, no bugs, nothing. That kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. That night, I stayed up reading just to keep my mind busy. Around 2:00 in the morning, I heard something again. Not a knock this time, a dragging sound across the porch, slow, steady, like someone pulling something heavy across the boards. I sat there gripping the arm of the chair so hard my fingers went numb, barely breathing. The sound went on for what felt like forever, and then just stopped. I didn't look. I couldn't. The next morning, I was done, packed my bag, and decided to leave. But when I opened the door, something was waiting for me. My toothbrush just sitting there on the porch step, perfectly centered. I hadn't brought it outside. I hadn't even taken it out of the bathroom since I got there. My hands went cold. I ran for the car. The keys nearly slipped out of my fingers when I jammed them into the ignition. The engine cranked but wouldn't start. Tried again and again until the battery started to die. I sat there staring at the trees, convinced that if I looked long enough, I'd see someone standing out there. That night was the worst. I locked every door and window, built a fire so big it nearly ate half the wood pile. Saturday, with my back against the wall, clutching the iron poker from the fireplace. Sometime past midnight. I almost believed I'd imagined everything. Then the clock on the mantel chimed 3 times. That clock didn't have a chime. Then I heard it again, soft, broken sounds from the loft above me. Not words, just fragments of noise like someone trying to speak underwater. I climbed the ladder with the poker shaking in my hand. The loft was empty, but the bed wasn't flat. The blankets were twisted into the shape of a body, a head, shoulders, arms folded across the chest. I didn't check. I didn't need to. I climbed down, opened the door, and ran. I ran until the trees started to thin and the sky began to turn gray. By the time I hit a road, I could barely breathe. A trucker picked me up and drove me into town. The cabin's still out there. My uncle keeps asking me to go back. Says half my stuff's still inside, but I won't. My uncle left me a cabin in his will, not a house, not a vacation spot, a literal one-room shack with a lean-to kitchen nailed on like an afterthought. Still, it was mine. He'd lived up in the Appalachian forever. This total hermit type. No wife, no kids, just him in the mountains. Everyone in the family used to joke he'd turn into a tree up there. Honestly, I never visited because, well, he wasn't exactly a people person. When I signed the paperwork, I told myself I'd go check it out just for a weekend. Take a few pictures, see what he left behind, maybe grab some of his old tools, and then rent the place out to hikers who like rustic charm, you know. The kind of people who post sunrise photos on Instagram and call it disconnecting. The drive up there was the kind of thing you'd see in a bad horror movie and think, no one would actually do that. Except I did. Asphalt turned to gravel. Gravel to dirt and then road became a generous word. My car crawled along at a snail's pace while I prayed I wouldn't meet another vehicle because there was nowhere to pull over, just a sheer drop on one side and a wall of trees on the other. I kept glancing at the GPS, but it gave up halfway and then there was nothing. No bars, no signal, nothing but trees that felt like they were closing in. At one point, I stopped the car and just sat there staring out the windshield, thinking, am I seriously doing this? By the time I hit the trailhead, I realized something. I hadn't seen another house in 15 miles, not even an old mailbox, just trees, ridges, and the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. The trail itself was only half a mile. Doesn't sound bad, right? Yeah, a half a mile of uneven ground, roots, rocks, and switchbacks going up with no sound except my boots crunching on leaves. No wind, no birds, just stillness. The kind that makes you start noticing your own breathing because it's the loudest thing for miles. When the cabin finally came into view, I stopped and stared, and the first thought in my head was, oh, okay, that's why he never left. And that's why he died here. It looked ancient. The boards were gray and warped like driftwood. Windows fogged over with grime. The door sagged like it had arthritis. And the roof, let's just say if it rained, you were getting wet. Inside was worse. One caught a table, two chairs that clearly didn't come from the same set, shelves stacked with old jars so dusty you couldn't read a single label. The air smelled like dust and something metallic like copper. Ever smelled pennies on your hands after counting change? Yeah, like that. I stood there looking around trying to laugh at myself for feeling creeped out. It was just a shack in the woods. People pay a fortune to rent this kind of off-grid experience. I swept the floor, unpacked, and started opening drawers. That's when I found them a stack of letters tied together with string. Maybe 50 of them, all sealed but weirdly light. Curiosity got me, so I opened one, empty. Opened another, empty. All of them were empty. Not a single word. I shrugged it off as one of my uncle's eccentric habits and left them there. That night, I heated up a can of beans on a propane stove, read a paperback until my flashlight started dying, then crawled onto the cot. The mattress felt like it had given up years ago. Every spring was a personal insult. I rolled over, and something hard jabbed me in the ribs. I reached under the mattress and pulled out a book, leather-bound, heavy, no title. Inside, the pages were filled with tiny handwriting, slanted, uneven, like someone was scribbling in a hurry. The first line said, "If you hear them, don't answer." I laughed out loud. It sounded like the kind of paranoid nonsense an old man might write after decades of isolation. But then I read the next line. They sound like people, you know. They aren't. That one didn't feel so funny. I shoved the book under the cot and told myself I'd read more in the morning, the second night. I woke up to a voice outside, a woman's voice. "Hello, can you help me?" It was close, like right outside the door. Soft, almost apologetic, like someone embarrassed to ask. Every instinct screamed, "Open the door!" I sat up, heart pounding, grabbed my flashlight, and froze. The windows were just black. No shadow, no shape, nothing. "Please," she said again, louder, "I'm hurt." And that, God, that's what made me freeze. Not the words, the way she said them. There was this pause, like she had to think about what came next. Like she was picking words out of a jar. I stayed silent. My throat felt locked. The voice didn't call again. Morning came and I stepped outside. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the mud, bare feet. They came right up to the porch and stopped. I packed my bag, told myself I'd leave after lunch. But then the fog rolled in. Thick, heavy, like someone dropped a wall around the cabin, 10 feet from the porch, and the trail was gone. No way was I wandering blind down a mountainside. So, I told myself, one more night. That evening, I pulled out the book again, and it got worse the deeper I read. Whole pages were just one sentence over and over. Don't open the door, don't open the door, don't open the door. The last page nearly tore through from the pressure of the pen. They know your name. I locked the door, shoved the table in front of it. Saturday on the cot, waiting. Midnight. 3 hard knocks. I didn't move. Then a voice. Calm. Familiar. Dorian. Open up. It's me. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. Hadn't said my name since I got there. The voice kept going. First, just my name. Then things no one should know. Memories I'd buried. Secrets I'd never said out loud. And the sound. God. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was in the walls, in the floorboards, like the cabin itself was talking. I clamped my hands over my ears, useless. The words slid under my skin, crawling inside my head. They stopped asking and started promising. If I opened the door, they said I could fix everything, see everyone I'd lost, make it all right. Then the handle turned slow, deliberate. I lunged, slammed the bolt, shoved the table harder. Something pressed from the other side, just enough to make the hinges scream. Then the voices multiplied. Men, women, kids, all talking at once, this low tidal hum circling the cabin. The walls groaned like something huge was leaning against them. And then silence. I sat there until daylight bled through the cracks. The fog was gone. The trail was clear. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just grabbed my bag and left. By the time I hit the car, my legs were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. My aunt owned this old cabin way out in the Appalachian Mountains every fall. My family made a little tradition of driving up there for a long weekend. No traffic, no neighbors, no hum of the highway, just trees and hills and a kind of silence you can't find in town. That year, my aunt thought she had the best idea ever. Let me and a few friends have the cabin to ourselves for one night. No parents, no supervision, just us. The cabin. And the kind of darkness that only happens miles from anywhere. We didn't even pretend to hesitate. 8 of us. Me, Jess, Megan, Kara, Emily, Bella, Chris, and Zach jumped at the chance. Movies, snacks, maybe a hike if we felt outdoorsy. It sounded perfect. We rolled up that afternoon in a caravan of parents' cars, hauling duffel bags and sleeping bags like we were moving in for the summer. The cabin wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a sagging couch, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and old wood. The wallpaper was this faded floral pattern that probably hadn't been updated since the 72nd. The shelves were stacked with mismatched mugs and chipped plates, like every set had been broken down to survivors over the years. The road in was basically 2 strips of gravel pretending to be a driveway, and the nearest neighbor was 2 amis away, maybe more. At 14, that kind of isolation felt like freedom, like we'd been cut loose from the world. Now I know what isolation really feels like. And it's not that romantic. The first few hours were perfect. We dumped our stuff in piles and claimed spaces on the floor. Someone found a deck of cards in a drawer. Someone else started a playlist. We spent the afternoon exploring outside because, when you're that age, you can't just sit still when you've got a whole forest at your feet. Behind the cabin, a narrow trail led up to a ridge. We climbed it and found this incredible view. Miles of forest rolling like waves under a sky so wide it made you feel small. No roads, no rooftops, not even a wisp of smoke from another chimney, just trees all the way to the horizon. It was beautiful, but there was something about that endlessness that tugged at me, like if you stepped wrong, You just disappear and nobody would ever know where to start looking. Later. We went down to the creek that snaked along the property, took pictures, threw rocks in the water. Jess, being Jess, blasted music from her little Bluetooth speaker the entire time like we were on some kind of backwoods runway. We were loud, laughing, yelling, probably scaring off every living thing within a mile radius. By the time the sun slipped behind the trees, we'd started a fire out back. The woods turned black so fast it felt like someone flipped a switch. We roasted marshmallows and told dumb stories. It should have felt cozy. And for a while, it did. Then around 9, the power went out. No warning, no flicker, 1 second. The cabin was warm and lit. The next it was swallowed in darkness like someone dropped a curtain over the world. For a second, nobody moved. Then Jess laughed. This sharp little sound that made everyone else laugh too. Old wiring, she said. Cabin probably can't handle all the lights and the phone chargers at the same time. Nobody freaked out. We had a couple of battery lanterns and a few flashlights, honestly. It kind of added to the vibe, made it feel like a real adventure instead of just a sleepover in the woods. That's when someone suggested we go down to the old bridge by the creek. It wasn't far, just a trail that cut behind the ridge. The bridge was this weathered plank of wood, missing half its railing, sagging like it was holding on by pure spite. The kind of place you'd pose for artsy pictures if you weren't thinking too hard about what might be in the water beneath it. So, we grabbed one lantern, Jess's speaker, and a few jackets, and set off. The trail felt different at night, narrower. The trees leaned in like walls. Every little sound, the whisper of water, the scratch of branches shifting against each other jumped out at me. My boots kept sinking in patches of mud, and every time I had to yank my foot free. I thought about how easy it would be to lose the path. One wrong step and the trees would just swallow you whole. When we got to the bridge, we set the lantern in the middle and sat around it in clumps. The creek below was so dark it looked like an open mouth. Someone tossed in a pebble and waited way too long for the splash. Jess played music soft enough that the woods almost smothered it for a while. It felt fine. Then Chris stopped laughing, just froze, staring past me like he was locked on something. I figured he was trying to freak us out. Classic Chris move. So I turned, ready to roll my eyes. And that's when I saw them. Shapes standing at the edge of the trail we just walked. 6, maybe 7, too far to see faces. No flashlights, no talking. Just standing there. Probably hunters. Someone whispered, but it didn't sound convincing. Nobody moved. Then the shapes started walking. Not slow, not casual, straight down the trail toward us. I kept waiting for the sound of boots crunching leaves, branches snapping under weight. Something. But there was nothing. Just the creek whispering and my heartbeat pounding in my ears like it wanted out. Carrara ran first. No scream, no warning, just shot up and bolted like a deer. Megan was right behind her, then Bella, then Emily, Chris. And Zach didn't even glance back. They just took off. Watching them scatter like that broke something in me. Made the whole thing real in a way my brain didn't want to admit. That left me and Jess on the bridge, frozen like idiots while the others vanished into the dark. I turned back to the figures. They were closer now. Close enough for the lantern to catch what should have been faces. Only there weren't faces. They were wearing sacks. Burlap sacks tied around their necks with thick cord like feed bags. The eye holes weren't even neat. Just jagged slits ripped open. And through those holes there was nothing. Just black. In their hands, they carry tools, not guns. Things meant for working or breaking or hurting. A hooked blade that gleamed wet in the lantern light. A hatchet. Something long and heavy like a steel pipe. My chest locked up so tight I couldn't breathe. Jess's fingers clawed into my arm like she was trying to anchor herself to something solid. And then they started moving faster. Jess lunged for the speaker. I don't know why. Panic instinct. She grabbed it like it mattered, and for some reason. That stupid move is what snapped me loose. She screamed my name, and suddenly I was running. The trail back to the cabin felt twice as long, twisted like it was trying to trick us. The lantern swung wild, throwing broken shards of light across trees that all looked the same. At the first fork, Jess veered left, and I followed, tearing through mud and ferns, lungs burning like they were on fire. Behind us, the silence broke, heavy boots hammering dirt, branches snapping like gunshots, still no voices, no words, just the raw sound of pursuit. Then the fence came out of nowhere, slick old rails covered in moss. Jess scrambled over fast, hit the ground running. I jumped, slipped, tried again, behind me. Those boots chewed closer, and then I swear I felt a hand. Just the lightest brush down my back, like they were patient, like they knew they'd get me eventually. I threw myself at the fence one last time and somehow cleared it, landing so hard it knocked the air out of me. Jess hauled me up by the arm, screaming for me to move. We didn't stop until the cabin lights appeared through the trees, a weak, dirty glow that felt like the only good thing left in the world. We hit the deck and slammed the door behind us, locking it with shaking hands. The others were already there, white-faced, silent. Chris's hand was bleeding bad. A deep slice across his palm. He said one of them grabbed him, and he barely yanked free before the blade went deeper. We killed the lantern, Saturday in the dark, listening. Every creak of the cabin made us jump, waiting for boots on the porch, waiting for fists on the door. Nothing came. The cops didn't show for 2 hours. They searched the trail, the bridge, the ridge. Found nothing. No sacks, no tools, not even footprints. They called it a prank. That word made me want to scream because I'd felt that hand, heard that breath. Our stuff was still out there by the bridge. The lantern, jackets, a bag of chips, untouched. I never went back to that cabin. My aunt sold it a year later. People still ask why, and I never know what to say. The first time I saw the cabin, I almost missed it. Honestly, it looked like a part of the woods had just slumped down and given up. The thing blended into the slope so well, it might as well have been a dead tree or a rotting stump leaning slightly to one side. Boards gone gray from rain and sun. Roof patched with a mess of shingles that didn't match. There was no smoke from the chimney, no smell of wood burning, nothing that said lived in. It just sat there, an empty shape, like it was holding its breath and waiting for something. I wouldn't even have noticed it if the window near the peak hadn't caught the sunlight at the right angle. Just this quick slice of glare, like an eye opening for a second before snapping shut again. And the thing is, I wasn't even looking for a cabin. That wasn't part of the plan. My uncle owns a big piece of land out here in the Appalachian. Miles of steep woods. Valleys that feel like they've never seen a human footprint. Old logging roads that start out promising and then vanish into nothing. When I told him I needed a break, some time away from everything, he said, "Use the hunting place, it's quiet." So that's what I thought. I was getting a proper hunting cabin. Maybe rustic, sure, but something with actual walls and maybe even a porch. It wasn't that, not even close. What I found was one small room, plank floors you could probably see daylight through if you dropped a coin. A cot with a mattress so stained it looked like someone had been keeping secrets on it. And a propane stove that honestly scared me more than the idea of running into a bear. The thing looked old enough to be in a museum of things that explode. But I wasn't there for luxury. I wasn't there for comfort. I came out for quiet, for no signal, no neighbors, no traffic noise, no screens glowing at me, just trees. Just stillness. After the months I'd had, the idea of silence sounded like a gift. The hike in wasn't bad. The trail was soft in places, and there were spots where the markers were so faded I had to squint. But I made it when I finally got to the shack. I shoved the door open and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell, a musty, dusty kind of scent, like wet wood and old rodent nests. I dropped my pack, unrolled my sleeping bag, and went straight for the broom in the corner. The floor was scattered with mouse droppings. I started sweeping, the bristles scratching against the boards and kicking up enough dust to choke on. My eyes watered and my throat burned, but when I was done, the place almost looked decent. Not nice, just acceptable. That first night was easy. I sat at the little table with a lantern, the notebook I brought open in front of me. I told myself I'd write something every night, even if it was just a sentence. No distractions out here, just me, my thoughts, and the occasional groan of wood outside when the wind shifted. It was almost good. Peaceful in a way I'd forgotten how to feel. When I finally crawled into my bag, I felt calm, like my brain had turned down a notch for the first time in months. The second night was the same. The third night, the silence was so thick it started to feel like it had weight, like I was breathing it in. And then I woke up to find the broom lying across the doorway. I froze, just staring at it. I'd left it propped in the corner, no question about that. Now it was on the floor, laid at an angle like someone had put it there to block the door. The thing is, the floor tilted away from the entrance, so it shouldn't have rolled. Not like that. I picked it up, put it back, and laughed under my breath, like it was a joke that barely landed. Told myself I must have bumped it, which didn't even make sense because I was in my sleeping bag, but I didn't feel like arguing with myself about it at 3 suitors in the morning. That evening, I tried to write again, but I couldn't get into it. The page just stared back at me while the windows turned black, no curtains, just glass. And outside was nothing but darkness pressing in. The lantern felt small, ridiculous. I ended up leaving it on when I lay down. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. A tap, just one, on the wall, sharp and hollow. I sat up so fast my ribs hurt, ears straining so hard they felt like they'd pop. I waited. Nothing. Not another sound. No footsteps, no second tap. Just my pulse and maybe wind, if it was wind. Morning made it easy to shrug off. It always does. I stepped outside, half expecting to find a branch leaning against the wall. Nothing. No branch. No tracks. Just a carpet of wet leaves and the narrow deer path curling deeper into the hills. By day 5. I needed a bigger distraction. So, I hiked over the ridge. The trail narrowed until I wasn't even sure it was a trail anymore, just a crease in the earth. The air was damp, heavy, like it was hanging on me. And then I saw at another cabin. It was sitting low in a hollow about 2 Miski in, sagging like it had given up years ago, roof half-caved, door shut tight, windows like empty eye sockets. I didn't need a reason to stay away. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go closer. And then I saw the footprints, bare feet in the mud by the steps. I froze, trying to figure out how old they were. It had rained 2 nights ago, so they should have washed out. But they were perfect, crisp, every toe showing like whoever left them had just walked off into the trees. My skin prickled like I'd walked through a web. I backed up slowly, step by step, until the trees swallowed the hollow. Then I turned and walked fast. Too fast. When I got back to my cabin, the broom was across the door again. That night, I didn't undress, didn't even unlace my boots. I sat on the cot with the lantern burning and my pack half zipped, telling myself over and over that it was nothing. Just a broom, just some old footprints, nothing. I lay down sometime after 2, but I don't think I slept. The sound woke me anyway, a scrape, then a slow dragging slide, like something brushing across the boards outside, circling, then tapping. Tiny knocks, uneven, like whoever or whatever was out there couldn't decide on a pattern. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. My pulse was so loud I almost didn't hear when it stopped. And then 2 hard raps on the wall right by my head. I sat up so fast the lantern swung wild, throwing shadows across the floor. The broom's shadow jumped like it was moving. I grabbed the broom without even thinking, like that would help, and whispered, "Who's out there?" Nothing, no voice, no footsteps, just the creak of trees and my voice sounding small. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor until dawn, waiting for something else that didn't come. By morning, I was done. My week wasn't over, but I didn't care. I packed in 10 minutes flat. I should have left the night before, but the trail was wrong. What had been a straight shot to the ridge now curled into thicket I didn't recognize. Landmarks were gone. I walked half a mile before I hit a wall of deadfall I'd never seen before. Branches piled like a barricade. I backtracked, tried another direction, another wall of brush. None of it looked natural. By sunset, I was back at the cabin, legs shaking, water almost gone. I told myself I'd try again tomorrow, that night. The knocks didn't come. The dragging did. Long, soft strokes across the boards, circling the walls, sometimes pausing, sometimes doubling back, like fingers tracing seams. When the first knock hit the door, my throat closed, and then came the voice, not outside, inside, low, almost gentle, from the corner near the stove. "Don't go back." I spun with the lantern, and nothing. Just my gear, the cot, and a stain on the floor that hadn't been there yesterday, spreading like a shadow. I stood slow, every nerve screaming. And that's when I saw the broom, not by the door. In the center of the room, standing upright, balanced like a trick. Something shifted behind me, air or breath, I couldn't tell. And I ran. Didn't grab my pack, didn't grab the lantern. I just ripped the door open and sprinted into the dark. Branches tore at my arms. Roots clawed my boots. I ran until the ground tilted, and the sound of water roared up out of the black stream. Then, gravel. I stumbled onto a logging road and followed it by moonlight until a truck came. The driver didn't ask why I was bleeding or coatless. He just drove. I never went back.